taking my time. I feel like I'm out of my mind. It feel like my life ain't mine.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Project Mayday. These are your hosts G and Bree, and today we have a power couple. It is Amy and Herb Campbell. They are from Central California, and Amy is a registered nurse for a trauma center in Central California. It's one of the busiest and also a burn center. So she has a lot of stories from there that you'll definitely hear. And then Herb is a engineer paramedic for San Jose City Fire Department, and he's got about 25 plus years in the EMS industry. So thank you so much, you two, for coming on, and welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. And Herb, I know you just worked last night, so thank you for joining us.
No problem at all.
Absolutely. So let's start the conversation. First and foremost, Amy, let's start off with you. How is your hospital dealing with this COVID crisis going on?
So we are busy. We are seeing, the Central Valley just went into lockdown mode or stay-at-home mode this weekend because our ICU bed dropped in the area less than 15% availability. So I think on yesterday, it was like 13%. It's tough. We're busy, busy with EMS, busy holding patients in the emergency department. Staff are out because they're getting sick or have close contacts getting sick, and so it's a very trying time in the emergency department these days, in healthcare in general, but yes, in the emergency department, since that's where I'm at.
So Herb, how has running a typical call changed for your department?
Yeah, we are one of the first departments I would say in California that got hit with COVID. We actually had. Before it even really came out, we had any policies set in place. We had a couple guys, a whole station that got hit with COVID before we even knew that we would how to handle a situation. We had one guy who actually got pretty close to being intubated into a hospital and stuff like that. So he was one of the first things, and we after that we really implanted a lot of policies, and we really built up. And I have to say we kind of backed off a little bit on that after that big burst of it. Seeing we didn't need as much, because every call came down as we need a chest pain, shortness of breath. Okay, it's a cough. Well, it just seems to go that way. So everybody would gown up, and we're like, we were going through gowns and everything, and we're like, this is just one of our regular routine calls. So we kind of backed off of that. We were very good and diligent about it. We weren't one of the departments where we wore a mask inside the station. It was just strictly on calls. And then unless we had a confirmed one, then we would go to the more stringent N95 mask where we more filtered, and then we would limit who went in there. We have 4 crew members on our team. There's a paramedic, firefighter, engineer, and a captain. And so if we had a confirmed case, the paramedic goes in, decides whether this is actually an active COVID case or a projected one. And if not, then the rest of the crew would come in and help out. And initially we'd try and see if we could get the patient to walk outside in an open environment to talk to them and stuff. If that wasn't realistic to do, then we'd go in. And if we thought it was a full-on COVID, then we'd all gown up and do that. We've really kind of backed off of that on that case. Our biggest thing right now, we just started having more of, I would say, guys bringing it from outside in rather than patient contact. We've had a lot more guys all of a sudden say, hey, I'm calling up, hey, I'm COVID positive. What do you want me to do now? I don't know if I got it from at work, but it's been 4 days since I've been at work. I could have, but I would say most of the times it's probably from outside environment like this. And so we started having that, and they started being more stringent. Before it was like if you were exposed, the rest of the crew, if you weren't having symptomatic, come to work.
Yeah.
Now you're exposed to another guy on the crew, everybody just goes home and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of been this resurgent where they've gone back and been a little more aggressive.
Yeah, staffing has always been an issue anyway, and now we're going to add in special protocol of not coming to work.
Right.
No, so when you were speaking, so what I heard was the paramedic is a sacrificial lamb. You send him in, or him or her
No, they're
in.
called the canary.
Yes.
Gotcha. But Herb's driving. He's chilling.
That's it.
He doesn't even get out of the rig.
I go, there's the ambulance. That's where right there is where you should go. And stuff.
That's the experience there. 20 plus years,
That's
you're not getting out first.
Wave and then come on in. And stuff.
That's awesome.
Well, speaking of experience, Amy has a really interesting title. So you're actually a pre-hospital liaison nurse. Can you tell us what that means?
So it is a position in the emergency department that works closely with the pre-hospital providers. So any of the fire, the ambulances, private or public. I also work closely with our county EMS system, although I am employed by the hospital. So I'm the one that sits on meetings with EMS, and then I give feedback to my bosses and to the hospital. I also train the nurses in our department. When they get to a certain level of seniority, they become MICNs or mobile intensive care nurses. And they're the ones that provide base hospital contact when the paramedics or EMTs are out in the field and they need direction, or just now it's, just let them know that when they're coming into the hospital. So I teach them with my counterparts at the other hospitals here in the Valley. So we put them through a pretty intense 6-week course learning about EMS policies and protocols. And then I also teach our residents when they become in their second year of residency. I teach them the policies and protocols also, but they only get a 1-day class as opposed to the nurses. I get a 6-week class.
It's always about the nurses. It's always
about the nurses.
I'm actually going off script a little bit here, but do you guys ever get into little spats at home about, just the paramedic and the nurse and how that...
All the time. It is a good thing that we don't work in the same system. And and even when I am teaching because I do a lot of it, teaching at the other providers. And so I will actually say, so my PLN job says that you need to follow policy. But from the emergency room nurse standpoint, just go ahead and give the first aid, because I'd rather keep you safe in the back of the ambulance, and then we can have a discussion about it. It can be written up, but I just think that's really important. And so we have that discussion lots of times about, well, aren't you going to just do it? And I'm like, well, you're kind of practicing medicine without a license. So it is different ways to use.
Us cowboys there in that, and we're in the department I work at, is that the protocols are different quite a bit in regards to what they allow and what they don't allow. Very little base contact goes on with us, and so. But I do hear calls she has where some of the paramedics do some really out of the box kind of stuff, and I'm like, wow, that needs to be reined in. So I understand that point of view like that, but. I do a lot of stuff, and then she goes, "Oh, I'd write you up for that."
She's like, "Yes, she will."
Yeah, she has done that. She has done that. I will attest to that.
We also teach together. We teach the hospital that I am employed by. We teach all the national park rangers and across the country. It's the only place in the United States that does this. So they come on as EMTs, and then our residents put them through a 4-week didactic course, and they get to be AEMTs. And so when you're out in the national parks, these are the people that are responding when you fall down or have a medical emergency on the trails or in the backcountry. So him and I get to work together and collaborate and teach skills lab and run through scenarios with them. So yes, we see eye to eye. Sometimes we teach, we come together, and then we also have disagreements in the way certain things should be run versus EMS.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You guys definitely have a unique perspective here, having both sides of the coin. And speaking of that, I kind of want to dive into that. In your professional opinion, what do you see as a main cultural difference between EMS first responder staff and the nurse hospital staff culture? What, if you had to point anything out, how do you think the culture differs?
Because I've only done emergency medicine. I've only done level 1 trauma medicine. And so I think it's different. hospitals in the area, they don't see EMS as part of the team. They don't really have, they're not bothered by them waiting in the hallways for 3 hours, or, trying to turn over a patient, or why didn't they get that IV in the combative patient? And because maybe I have a lot of knowledge about the policies and protocols, and being married to a first responder, and I work so closely with them. I just feel like the ED is just an extension of the pre-hospital standpoint. We all work we are a team. I try to enforce that with the nurses that come through the radio room. Like, this is part of our team. I mean, yes, they are bringing us work, but this is why we all got into this business, is to take care of patients. So we all have a very bleak sense of humor, or a dark sense of humor, I will say. It's along lines with cops and other EMS responders. Because if you talk to a nurse up in the ICU, they will not find half of the things I say funny.
No, absolutely
not. Man, she's like salty.
Yeah. So what about you, Herb? I know you and I recently left. Well, not recently, but a year. My year was December 3rd was my last day in 2019. So you and I know how we talk about the ER in the firehouse. But what about you? What do you think? What the differences are?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is that where we work is a little more austere, a little bit. There's a lot of variables that go into it. Whether you're in a house, you're on a street, you're on down the side of a hill. You don't have the perfect lighting. You don't have perfect settings with a patient cramped or something like this. And so when we bring the patients, a little more packaged up and everything. And so it's hard for the hospital staff to kind of get that vision of what we had when we showed up, where the patient was, and what we had to deal with, whether they were covered in feces or whether they were laying pinched between a toilet or off the side of a road in a car. We had to pull them out. They don't always have that real concept unless you have someone who's come from the field and worked in the hospital on it. So I think that's probably the biggest disconnect, is probably understanding what we have to do. So when the patient shows up, why that IV wasn't done, or why something wasn't performed, or why did you go and do this? That's the only thing. And we try and work with the staff there to give them informed information about what's on scene and what happened. But that's probably the biggest thing, is just they don't always understand what it's like, whether the lighting wasn't there, or whether there was a combat situation, it was chaos. Like I said, when we bring it in, it's nicely packaged on a gurney, and that's all been eliminated. And so that's the disconnect that they just can't really always get their hands around. And it's really hard sometimes. I do train some paramedics, is that this is what the picture you have to paint when you get to the hospital, what you had on scene, and then what you see right now may not present the same way. And so it's very important to paint that to them, so you can really maybe diagnose something different in regards to what they see.
Yeah. And you are a preceptor as well, right? You teach paramedics.
I was at one time and stuff. Now that I've moved to engineer, I don't precept and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, was that a driving force? Was that something that you honed in your time that you were a preceptor, that hey, this is the number one thing I want you to learn, is you have to paint that picture so that hospital staff knows exactly what they're dealing with when you get there.
Yeah, and when I was on the ambulance, I worked here in Fresno, but I wasn't an ambulance medic in my department in San Jose. So I didn't have a lot of time where we transported a patient. It was very rare that we transport. If the patient was an extremis in the code or something like that, then I stayed with the patient, ran the code. So I didn't always get a lot of experience. What we do is we bring a medic on from some other agency. I do the accreditation, make sure he knows the policies, the protocols, and do that. And my big thing was make sure you show me you're safe. You know the policies and everything like this. Maybe you can teach me something too if you come from another agency like this. By no means I know all of it. So, but the biggest thing for me would be just the policies and protocols. And then if we went to the hospital with a patient, then I could observe, okay, how did you talk to the staff? How did you pass off onto that? Maybe we can correct that and give a little background on that there. But I think that would probably be about the limitations in regards to when I was doing my accreditation for medics on the fire department.
Gotcha.
But he's also teaching EMT class here locally also.
That's great.
So he's able to impart some of his wisdom on
That's right.
It's all in that handlebar mustache, baby. It's all in that handlebar mustache.
The wisdom there is just extensive. Well, Amy, you touched on something. You used this word, team, and we always talk about this team concept. Has there been a time in your career that you had to deal with a very difficult call within the hospital? And also, if it has happened, did you feel like you were a working team at that time?
From the bedside nursing staff, I think, especially when you are in the high acuity levels, whether that's the trauma bays or like the critical care areas in the emergency department, like your resus bays, definitely the nurses and the physicians are a team. Especially, we work with residents, so it's great that we get to see them for 4 years, and it's amazing how they grow as they come on as a first-year resident to when they graduate in their 4th year, and how they have, they come in straight out of medical school and they're like, hey, we're the physicians. We know everything, right? And just like, the nurses are like, yeah, we'll show you. And, so I think from difficult cases, so yes, a team approach from the staff. It's just hard because in the emergency department, we work so hard to save all our lives, all the lives that come with us. And it's without judgment. It's very hard to, where we live has a lot of gang problems. And so when you have someone that has been a victim of an assault or shooting of a gang member, and then you also have the gang member come in also. And so it's like, how do you have to take the best care for both of them, kind of like the parent or the sibling that drives under the influence with like a child or a younger sibling in the car, and they're both critically injured. I mean, now's not the time for me to scold the parent about how dare you, you're an awful parent or whatever. And they deserve the best care, just like the patient, the child does, the innocent victim.
Yeah.
But I think I've been in this system for 20 years. Mental health has become more of a focus. There was times when I had very bad calls and we just have to turn around and move the patient, whether that's move them back home, move them upstairs, move them downstairs to the morgue, because we have another incident coming in. So you don't really have the time to like decompress, to cry, because you have another emergency coming in.
Yeah. And being at the busiest trauma center in, that area, it's a revolving door.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then Herb, you being in San Jose, it's busy. I'm sure it is,
Well, yeah. And I think the biggest thing probably with me is that I'm even more a revolving door. I'm dropping off, sending them off my ambulance and gone out. And there's an accumulation of those calls getting up in your head or whatever. But I have such a short time with them. I don't have this necessarily build a bond so much often with them. Not usually, unless it's a long call or something like that. But I have that luxury where I can shed that pretty quick. That patient sits in their ER for quite a while, so definitely a disadvantage in that regard, where you're with one-on-one with that patient for quite a while. I don't have that, so I can kind of get that callous skin work, just a brief time with them, hand them off, and it's done, and I'm moving on to my next call. But I don't have that long duration that she has with some patients, where you develop maybe a type of bond with them.
Yeah. And back when you first started, you did have that. You did have a longer duration with your patients. So I know Amy had a pediatric call in the ER that she really holds to her heart, and that's affected her. How you've been in the field for 25 plus years. I know you've had your share of pediatric calls. Is pediatrics different than normal patients that we get, as far as like just a normal run of the mill code, or how do you deal with those pediatric patients, and then how does Amy deal with them, and do you guys bring that together when you come back in the home and talk about it?
I've been pretty fortunate that all mine were kind of before I went in the fire service, everything, the ones I had, but they definitely just take that heart rate up a whole nother notch.
He's more emotional.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, that's what this is about, and getting to those conversations, and if you're uncomfortable, that's definitely all right, buddy. No pressure. Absolutely. But
yeah, Amy, do you want to talk about any of your incidents and how it affected you in your relationship?
Yeah. So, I mean, the one that I have spoken to G about, that was probably about 12, 13 years ago. So we do have a 16-year-old daughter. So it was a child abuse case that had come in, and just very unfortunate, bad outcome, and then it ended up going to trial. And so then you have to relive it, because you're going to be called to the witness stand because you were the nurse that took care of this and stuff. And at the time, I didn't really think, yes, it's sad, but it's kind of part of the job. And then my daughter, it was 9, so she was 7 years ago. There was a case that came in, and there was a mom had taken her daughter to the store, and gang shooting occurred around the incident, and I was the nurse that took the call in. I was the nurse that sat with the mom, and the daughter collapsed right in front of her mom. She was shot, and she ended up not surviving. But it was hard because it's like a mom. I personalized it because the mom took her daughter to go get milk on a summer evening at the liquor store, and like what I do. I mean, granted, it's not in the same area of town that I go to Vaughn's or Save Mart to get milk with my daughter. But I personalized it because this was, they weren't in a bad area of town. Was a mom and a daughter just getting milk for cereal the next morning. And, I cried about it. I cried about it on my drive home. I called Herb, and I was like, I broke down, and it was just really sad. And I cried, and I thought about it for a couple of days. I got a good cry out of it. I talked to my friends. I talked to the other nurses that were there, and I talked to my husband. And at the time, I was doing some work with the law enforcement agencies in our town for a gang task force. And we would go as a task force, and we would talk to big wheelers in the gang community, I would say. And it was just about stopping the violence. Mm-hmm. And the chief at the time had mentioned this case, and it was probably a year after the case. And when I actually got up to talk, and it wasn't even about that, he had just mentioned it as she was, collateral damage in this war of gangs. And I just started bawling because I was it was unexpected. It came from nowhere. I wasn't expecting him to mention her name, and it was just wow, this is something that I need to deal with. I mean, I think it wasn't so much so close to the surface until it became it was out of nowhere, a year after it happened. And I still think of that whenever I hear her name. And but yeah, it's something that it brought everything to forefront. This is a real deal, and I think I need to maybe step aside from the patient's bedside, and I still want to be in the emergency department, but I can't be by the bedside the entire time anymore, because I think these cases, I want to still be I still want to be healthy and go and be a productive mom, and be a productive wife, and be a productive friend, and not wrapped up in these horrors that we are faced with almost on a daily basis. So how do I deal with it? And that was the way I chose to deal with it, that I had to step away from it and still just put my point of view somewhere else, on education and, on teaching.
Yeah. And Herb, I see you looking over at Amy and kind of nodding. And, when she was talking about that, do you remember that conversation, when she called you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's heartfelt, you get there and you have a kid.
Yeah. Something I want to point out, and I kind of want to dive into it a little bit, is, so as a male, Herb, what do you think are the stereotypes that prevents you from fully feeling these tragic calls?
I think you can name them all.
You're a firefighter. Well, you're an
Right
engineer.
there.
You're a paramedic.
Not
You're
big guy,
25.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But I think that culture has changed. It's not a stigma. It's not frowned upon. You have to go and do counseling to talk about it. It's very much encouraged, and the guys talk about it all the time in the department, in the station. It's something. It's super. And our department, it's like there's not even a worry about money. You want to go do it, go get it done. We've been to counselors talk, and the counselor's like, "Wow, I've never seen this where it was unlimited. You just go there and you can talk whatever you want and go through." And so, like I said, what I've heard from like a lot of military is that before there was this stigma, same thing with that macho-ness, that you didn't talk about any of that there. And, but that is kind of really faded away. And now they realize, we had a period back, probably about, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, where we had quite a few suicides, and they said, this is a problem. We need to address this. We need to have actually more teams go out and talk to crews after, which we think was an incident, or if our captain recognizes that we need to have someone talk on there. But we're pretty lucky in regards to at a station we can talk. We have 4 guys, or there may be some females in there occasionally, but we can talk and sit there and usually work it out, feel pretty good, or bounce off everybody. And I've never felt like I've been at any station where you couldn't talk to someone and let it out and see how they feel it and get back on it and stuff. And so you definitely have a little bit of working through with it, and you realize you're not the only person that, man, that was powerful. That hit me hard and stuff. And so, I know when I first started off, there was that macho kind of stuff, we won't talk about this, and pretty much how I was raised. You don't, you just deal with it. You put your head down, you just do the work and everything like this, and you build up callous. And I think my problem is having kids got me soft. And I think it's probably on that part.
And also getting older.
Well, so Amy, seeing his transition when he talks about being macho and all that, and that's that's how you met him, and how has he transitioned into being a softie, and are there pluses to there? Are there minuses to that? Speak to that a little bit.
So I mean, yeah, it's not so much because like he says, he's been fortunate to not have like really bad pediatric calls, but he there was one time we were sitting at the dinner table, and we're just I don't know, some families don't like to talk shop, but I think because we're both in it, I mean, there is a time when it's just like I can't talk about work, right? It's just I just kind of need to like table it for a while, give me 24, 48 hours or whatever, let me get some good sleep in, but he was telling me about this call with it was an older couple, and so he just was very heartfelt and was just like it was just like this man whose wife was like on end of life care and stuff, and how it was just like he just wanted to help the husband, help him help his wife, right? I mean, he knew that the wife was going to die and was just in a lot of pain. And I think from the standpoint of nurses, at least in the ER, that's something that we don't get to see until they actually come. And we also have tons more resources in our department, right? We have social services, we have social workers, we have a lot more drugs, and we have like protocols where his job as a paramedic was like, I really just want to give her the morphine that she needs because she's not getting it from home health or the hospice nurse. And it was just as much for the husband as it was for the patient, right? I mean, it's just like, because the husband is also suffering, because he's losing his partner and so on and so forth. Oh, excuse me. And so I see him becoming more soft or more emotional about those kind of issues. We've also had my dad was in the hospital for 60 days, and we chose comfort care for him. And so I also know we also appreciate and value the end of life care that people choose to have. And I think unless you are in the business and you see the suffering of dying versus, and it's also very scary. And I think that as EMS providers, as nurses, I think that's good to talk to the family members about what dying looks like,
Yeah.
and to give respect to the process, although it might be scary for someone that's never seen someone die. But I think that in itself, along with mental health, I think things are changing with allowing that, death doesn't have to take place in a hospital room somewhere, but also respect the family members that just get too scared at home and might want to go against their spouse's wishes.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen
DNR or
that.
comfort care, because they just, yes,
It's
it was
scary.
something we talked about and agreed to, but now that the time has come, it's very scary, and I don't feel comfortable being at home while they are passing.
Yeah. My mom always says things. She has this quote, and it really stuck to me as a paramedic. She said, there are worse things in life than dying. And I think we see that. And that's difficult. And when you connect to a call and you come home to a spouse that also understands, I think, it definitely can help, your mental wellness, being able to relate and share that. And maybe it is getting older. Maybe it is just being in the game a long time. But regardless, it seems like you both definitely are pillars of strength for each other. And I can even tell on this podcast, when you guys start getting a little emotional, you bring it back. The other one jumps right in. And I think that's really precious in a relationship.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
It's been 20 years. So,
So you know by now.
All right, guys. So, Amy, I know you've been stressing about this a little bit, but this is rapid fire. How we like to end.
oh my God. I am more scared about this than I actually was the interview.
So, rapid fire. This is you have to answer in one word or one phrase.
One word or one phrase.
Absolutely. One word or one phrase. So it's 5 questions, and that's it. You only get that amount of time, one word or one phrase, and that's it. We move on to the next question. All right. So first, we'll start off with Amy, and Bree will take over.
Okay, Amy, what was your first impression of Herb on your first date?
Actually, we met at the ER, and I actually made fun of him because he had prescription sunglasses, and so when he came in, they still hadn't switched to like regular glasses, and I kind of poked fun at him like, ooh, too cool to take your sunglasses off.
Okay, so Herb, when she said that, what was your first impression?
And she had the big hair like that,
It was
like,
more out. It was more out back in the day. It was more blown
It
out.
was longer.
It was longer, and then I'm 10 years older than her, so I'm like, okay, who is this sassy little girl who's talking to me? And I'm like, she's cocky. I like her. She wasn't salty. She was just like, hey, what's up? So I was her first. It definitely attracted me, like this beautiful blonde hair out here, and then she was like all snapping at me. I'm like, hey, are you picking on the handicap? I've got prescription sunglasses on. Is that how you treat people here at the hospital? So, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, next question. We're going to start with Herb first. What is a bad habit about your spouse that you could live without?
Whoa.
Uh-oh, look at her eyes.
I'm surprised it just didn't fall from his mouth.
I think he's trying to pick and choose right now.
Careful.
If he's gonna sleep on the couch or.
I guess maybe just her telling me things that I would already know. Hey, there's food in the fridge. I'm like, I know there's food in the fridge. I lived on my own for 10 years before she even goes, hey, I've got chicken in the fridge. I'm like, I live here. I know what's in the refrigerator. What do you need?
It's the mom. It's the caregiver.
Yeah. All right, Amy. Same question to you.
What's a bad habit about Herb that you could live without?
Snoring or nail chewing. It's just absolutely.
There you go.
All right, number 3.
Okay, so this is a fun one.
This is it. Yeah.
If aliens showed up to your house and told your daughter, "Take me to your leader," which parent would she take them to?
Me.
Hey, wait, hold on. Herb's hesitating.
I don't know. She really likes Star Wars Mandalorian, and we'd probably go together and stuff, the two of us.
But you're not the leader. You'd go up in the spaceship, but you're not the leader. You'd have to ask me to go in the spaceship first.
He goes, Mom won't even believe in this. He's just going to take me up anyway.
Gotcha. Number 4.
All right, number 4. favorite date night during COVID?
Probably out to a really nice dinner. I mean, obviously now everything's shut down, but during the summer we went out and celebrated our 20th anniversary, and it was one of our favorite restaurants. So going out, eating really nice food, having good cocktails or a good glass of wine, and always with dessert.
Herb, what do you got?
Yeah, do you echo that?
Yeah, no, I would concur with that. Just something simple like that where we're going out, but a nice thing where we can just focus. We're out, and actually I think because the restaurant we went to, the outdoor seating actually made for a
relaxing evening.
I'm being kind of old, so a lot of noise maybe bothers me. So it was nice and quiet. We could talk and chat like this and stuff. So I'll be just yelling all the time, sometimes noise like, hey, it's kind of crowded in here. But so I liked it being outside. It was kind of nice that way. So I did enjoy that too.
Okay. Final one.
Amy, we'll start with you. What's one thing you cannot live without about your spouse?
About myself or my spouse?
No, your spouse. So her.
Just his laugh. You know, I'm funny. I think laughter just gets us through so much stuff. It's really hard for me to talk and not laugh or like joke or something. But he always is. He's always very lighthearted. So he can always. If I know I can make him laugh, then that's all I really need sometimes.
Herb, what about you?
I would say just. She's solid for me. She just something I can bounce off. Just gives me the no BS about what we should do on there. And so it's a great thing. It's like, okay, I might get talk to someone else and give me some niceties, but still tell me the no BS, nice solid information to get back from her. So I do like that. And if I didn't have that, if I had someone who was just a pushover, it would really suck for sure.
I'm pretty blunt.
Yeah. Well, no, I know that. I know that. You've written me up before. I know that.
Hey, I'm glad I never had a transport with you to the patient.
Oh, man. All right, guys. That kind of concludes it. Thank you so much. Like Herb,
sorry,
I said,
I broke down a little bit there.
We love it. That's what it is.
That's what this is about, buddy. That's what this is about. Just showing your real self, being vulnerable, because that's what creates true leaders, and that's what creates future leaders. Is showing that next generation that hey, it's okay to not be okay, right? So thank you so much for coming on. I know you're tired, Herb. I know you're gonna get some sleep after this. So
no, good brother. I had my bicycle ride. I got my fitness and I'm good.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We had Amy and Herb on. Hopefully we get them on again and call out.
Call out.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing it, guys.
I finally